Please welcome Dr. Raymond DuBois, past president of the American Association for Cancer Research and dean of the College of Medicine at the Medical University of South Carolina. Here with author and journalist Charles Graeber.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, Dr. DuBois.
Good morning, Charles.
Thanks for being here. We've just seen a video. As referenced in that video, we've seen that the American Association for Cancer Research is setting an especially bold agenda for that research, and that research continues to be our best defense against cancer. I know this is a relatively short conversation we get to have here, but if you could you tell us about some of the latest advances in cancer research and how they've led to progress for patients?
Sure. So one of the publications of the ACR is our annual report. You can get it on the table out there. It really has everything in it, which we won't be able to cover in 7 minutes here. But so basically, the two major advances, and the audience has heard about these earlier, is immunotherapy and precision-targeted therapy. Immunotherapy is just really taken off because you can use these so-called checkpoint inhibitors to unleash the patient's own immune system, which then attacks the cancer, destroys the cancer cells. It's worked really well in some subsets of cancers like melanoma and others, but clearly there's more work to be done, and that's why we want to support the research, because we need to understand why all tumors don't respond and why some become resistant, and all of those things require a lot of extra research to develop. And I think one of the lessons from this immunotherapy that we haven't talked about so much is that a lot of the basic tumor immunology was done in the late 80s and early 90s, and those discoveries led to the translational science and clinical science that led to the product that was approved in 2011 for checkpoint inhibitors. So we have to be patient and fund that basic science so that you can get across the goal line. And then lastly, one of the other things that we're coming to understand is that tumors that have these molecular changes, the drugs target that change, and so they can be used for a number of different tumors if they have that particular problem. So there's these NTRK fusion in some tumors, salivary gland tumors and others, that produce these TRK proteins, and then there's inhibitors that are very effective at treating that, and there are a whole class of different tumors that could be treated in that way.
There's so much to cover in this, and as mentioned, we've got great resources from the ACR, including the ACR Cancer Progress Report. I know there's a giant version available outside. You can take a look at that. That's an annual report that's released each September. The ACR also has a wonderful magazine for cancer patients and their families called Cancer Today. I'd recommend taking a look at that if you haven't. But talking about that report, it's a comprehensive overview of the remarkable progress that's made against cancer just in the last 12 months. What would you like to highlight from that report?
Yeah, so some of the things that I think are remarkable, in the last 12 months, 16 of the 17 new cancer drugs were approved. Overall, the cancer deaths have been declining since 1990. Dr. Glemsher talked about this earlier. But one of the remarkable things this year is that they've declined also in African American men. Not as much as we would like to, but at least they're not going up, and there's a change in the curve there, which we need to continue to improve on. And then really good news is that we almost have 17 million cancer survivors, which is a new record, and we want to see that number go up over time. And then there is going to be a breakout session sponsored by ACR at 11:25 in Ballroom C, talking about patients partnering with scientists to try to improve the progress and accelerate the progress. And I should mention, you wrote the breakthrough book on immunotherapy, so already know a lot of the answers to these questions.
Well, thanks for the plug. Appreciate that. Back to the report, though. It's also a tool for advocacy, right?
Right.
It's an education resource that's used by everybody, including members of Congress. And so I'd like to focus on that for a minute. I know that the ACR is committed to advocating for increased annual funding to government entities that fuel the progress against cancer and improved public health, including the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Why is it so important that we get this funding? Are we doing enough? And how does that affect cancer outcomes for patients?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because the report is definitely used a lot for advocacy. When AACR decided to start doing the annual report, there was a lot of discussion about should it be annually or every 2 years or 5 years. And then I think the smart decision was to go annually because the progress is so rapid. And Congress really waits for this report. So I think it helps the staffers and others in Washington understand what's going on and what needs to be supported. The sad thing is that, only about 11% of applications that go to the NCI are funded. So there's a lot of research applications that are left unfunded and, scrap heap on the floor that really are proposing some very important basic science, some very important experiments that need to be done, but we don't have enough funding to support all of that. So that is really crucial to try to improve the, you think when you have billions of dollars, that's enough to do anything. But this research is very expensive. We're using a lot of different technologies you heard of in the previous session, a lot of artificial intelligence and other approaches. And it's just much more expensive to do than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So we need more funding to keep up with that progress. And we need to fill the basket of all the industry partners to have enough of that basic science so they can take it, develop a drug, and then make it available to the patients.
Right. Can we talk a little bit more about basic science here and the importance of it? When we think about cancer research, what we want is a cure to pop out of a lab, right? We want something that we can use, especially as patients. We're all patients or love someone who is. And so much of what that we're funding, of course, isn't just that end product, right? It's something fundamental. Can you speak about the importance of the relationship between those two things and why you can't have one without the other?
Yeah, it's extremely important because you have to have that discovery, and the discovery of the checkpoints is what led to the development of inhibitors that led to patients responding and potential cures. So when I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins, I worked with a professor who discovered what we call restriction enzymes. There are enzymes that can cut DNA at specific DNA sequences. And who would think that that would be useful? But that led to the possibility of sequencing the entire genome. And obviously, he got the Nobel Prize for that discovery. But that was a very basic virology study looking at enzymes made by bacteria that cut DNA at specific sequences. So we can't forget, where all of this advances came from and continue to support that basic science.
If there's one message you wanted to give Congress right now, in about 25 seconds, what would you say that was?
Well, we're trying to stay out of politics here, but I think there's all kinds of things going on in Washington. It's almost a circus. But one thing that they do all seem to agree on is to support research funding at the NIH, and I would say I would hope everybody here could give them that message, and we could make that happen.
I hope so too. Dr. DuBois, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, don't forget we've got that breakout session. Patients working with scientists in the West Ballroom C at 11:25. Thank you all, and thank you, Dr. DuBois.